Welcome to the second in our whiteboard series on the Lutheran Reformation. To make sense of the Lutheran Reformation, we first have to understand that Luther was not an outsider to the Catholic faith. He was a Catholic insider. He was a priest. He was a monk. He had been brought up within the Catholic world. And in fact, you really only start to come to grips with the Reformation when you understand that the most fervent reformers were precisely those who were most involved in the Catholic Church of their day. It was because they could see the problems of the Church of their day, because they were intimately acquainted with these problems, that the disconnect between what they felt the Scriptures were teaching and what they saw around them caused them so many issues. But Luther had no intention of splitting the church. He wasn't at the first point in 1517 thinking, oh, I'm going to be a reformer. I'm going to go change the whole church. I'm going to break away from it. That wasn't his intention at all. So think of him as an insider and as one who was not planning on the Reformation in 1517. That just was not his view. That's a later perspective on past events. Luther's best known for the 1517 95 Theses, the controversy over indulgences. A just quick explanation about indulgences. Indulgences were essentially documents provided by the Catholic Church based on the merits of the saints of the Virgin Mary and Christ accumulated over their lifetimes and given out to the faithful, originally in return for pious deeds such as going on a pilgrimage or accomplishing another pious act. And these indulgences could be given to the faithful and would give them time off purgatory. Purgatory after death was a place where a soul was cleansed before coming before the face of God. In Luther's day, these indulgences started becoming things that could be sold. And Luther objected strongly to what he saw as the corruption in the indulgence trade. His 95 Theses, originally intended for debate in Wittenberg, in the town where he was a university professor, were posted, displayed, printed in 1517. That's the date that most people see as the start of the Reformation. But in fact, the break was a gradual one over the course of at least 4 years, really culminating in the Diet of Worms in 1521, where Luther finally said he could not recant what he had already said, and from then on, the break was pretty definite. Now, Luther was both a challenger to the Catholic Church of his day, but also, in fact, a traditionalist. You do not find Luther deciding that everything had to be swept away and that he could start over from scratch. He retained a lot of aspects of Catholic worship, and we have to remember that. There were many people who were critical of Luther because they felt he wasn't going far enough or fast enough. These included his former colleague, another university professor, Andreas Karlstadt. It included the Zwickau prophets, who were men from a nearby town, from Wittenberg, who felt that they had been inspired by God and that their message, their spiritual message, called for further reformation. Luther did not go that way. He wanted to have the support of government authorities. He felt he could only go at a certain pace to retain that support, and he was not willing to break completely with the aspects of Catholic worship that still held the allegiance of the faithful. He felt he could not go faster than the people around him. He did not want to be a stumbling block to the faithful who needed time to adopt and adapt to these changes. One major event that really made things difficult for Luther was the Peasants War of 1525. The peasants had seized on some of Luther's ideas, had taken them and wanted again to go further with them. Luther, again this traditionalist, eventually objected and supported the princes in their defeat and really massacre of the peasants. Luther's also critiqued today for his writings on the Jews, and there's been a lot of controversy about those writings. In 1523, Luther wrote reasonably favorably about the Jews in a book called That Jesus Christ Was Born a Jew, trying to get Jews to convert, telling people not to harass or threaten the Jews in their communities. It was a small percentage of the population. By 1543, 20 years later, towards the end of Luther's life, he wrote very harshly against the Jews of his day, advocating their killing, that the synagogue should be destroyed and burned. Very forceful writings that today are considered anti-Semitic, and very troubling legacy that Lutherans today have really wholeheartedly rejected. So Luther's a complex person. You can't just think of Luther 1521 as the only vision of Luther standing firm, the hero against the might of the Catholic Church. By the end of his life, in many ways, he wasn't a very happy man. The changes he had hoped for in Lutheran society had not fully occurred.